Welcome to the second episode of Front Row and Center, a digital series presented by Colorado Music Hall of Fame in celebration of our 10th anniversary. Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Karen Radman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hall of Fame. Since 2011, Colorado Music Hall of Fame has inducted over 40 musicians, industry professionals, venues, and organizations that have made a mark on Colorado's music history. One of these legends is eTown, founded by our guests tonight, Nick and Helen Forster. eTown will be inducted into the Colorado Music Hall of Fame next Thursday. More on that during our session. Our host tonight is Patricia Calhoun, the founder and editor of Westword, Denver's free digital and print newspaper, and a Hall of Fame board member. During tonight's session, please type any questions that you have for Nick and Helen into the chat box, and we will reserve some time at the end to pose participant questions. Now it's time for you to pour yourself a libation and welcome Patricia Calhoun.
Thanks, Karen. Well, I'm the only person in this town who has been doing the same job, I think, longer than Nick and Helen, but they are doing it better than I am. It is such an honor to be here tonight with Nick and Helen Forster. I mean, eTown is a treasure. And these people were already treasures of the Colorado music scene before they even started eTown on Earth Day 1991, exactly 30 years ago. Nick, people had heard them, if you were born at the time. In Hot Rise, he had traveled the world playing his music. Helen was so instrumental with the Telluride, do I have it right, Bluegrass Festival, right? Or jazz, did I get it wrong? Telluride Festival, Bluegrass, and then they came together, started eTown 1 month they got 1 month before they got married. eTown is, well, first of all, eTown was before podcasts. What were you thinking, that people would actually like listen to people talk about, important issues, the environment, and listen to music and do it on the radio? How revolutionary. And now 30 years later, you think, genius. What were you thinking back then? Nick, I think that you came up with it while touring Europe. What were you thinking with
I came up with it, well, I was lucky. You mentioned, good to see you, Patty, first of all, and congratulations to you on all your success. I was lucky enough to have been in Hot Rise for a long time, as you mentioned. And we had gotten to play a lot of different radio and TV shows, including the Grand Ole Opry and Prairie Home Companion and the WWVA Jamboree from Wheeling, West Virginia, and Austin City Limits and a bunch of other shows. But I kind of fell in love with live radio. Just the excitement of the audience and the performance, and also knowing that it was reaching a bigger audience that wasn't just in the hall. And when I came home from that trip to Europe with Sam Bush, our kids at the time, or Helen's stepkids and my daughters, they were 13 and 10 and 7. And I started learning about climate change, and I started thinking about, wow, this power of music to bring people together, kind of like the festival that Helen was, obviously a partner and an owner of, but Telluride, it creates this community that's so cool. Wouldn't it be awesome to somehow use media to create that festival community and then have the community actually do stuff on behalf of the greater good? So it's a pretty simple concept. You are absolutely right that most of the radio stations, program directors at the time were like, would you just shut the hell up and play some music? So anyway, we started.
And I noticed early on that it was a lot to handle, and I had a background in radio in Telluride. I've been in theater and acting, to a lesser extent music, since I was a little kid. And I had written and acted in and produced a number of radio productions for KOTO when I lived in Telluride. And I thought, and I love live radio too, and performing, having people perform on live radio. And so when Nick mentioned it, I just sort of innocently said, well, can I help somehow? and that's how we continued.
But 30 years is incredible. And the different, well, that you got a hit pretty early on with NPR that picked you up, which was amazing. Do you think that really helped on the jump start?
Totally. Yeah, that was, and I'll be really honest, I called them up. I called up NPR before our first show. And I kind of was a little bit full of myself. And I just said, hey, it's Nick Forster from Hot Rise. And I've got this fabulous new show. And they told me to get lost. They were like, let me let you know, you have no history of doing anything in radio, and you don't have a pilot, and you don't know what you're doing. So go away. And by the way, raise a lot of money before you even call us back. So it was only a couple months later that we did our first show, because we just said, you know what, I think this is a good idea. We'll just try it. And I edited this little 8-minute cassette demo. And then I went down to the New Orleans Public Radio Conference, and I just hawked my wares. I started passing out all these cassettes. I had a suit on, and we made T-shirts, and I was just running the stand by myself and handing out brochures and cassette tapes and T-shirts. And I didn't know anything about anything. But NPR picked up one of those cassettes. This guy, Peter Pennekamp, who was the head of cultural programming at the time. And he called us up and he said, hey, I changed my mind. This is cool. I like what you're doing. I don't want to miss out on this. Let's work together and get this going. So yeah, I thought they would give us a big check and it would all be a lot easier. And they didn't, but they gave us distribution, and they allowed Helen to say, you're listening, you said.
This is NPR, National Public Radio.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you lost to National Public Radio for a while in the days when we were worried we would lose it entirely, thanks to Newt Gingrich and others. But that you had to pivot, to use the big term of the last year. So how do you reposition eTown?
We didn't really change much. As you say, after 4 or 5 years with NPR, they cut a lot of their programming because they were basically nervous of losing all federal funding. So they just tried to sort of act a little more vanilla. And
we almost made the cut.
Yeah.
11th hour, though, they after they had cut Afropop and Blue Stage and all these other kind of colorful shows, they cut in eTown, which they thought was a little bit too much of a stretch. We
were hippies from Boulder, Patty. Come on.
Talking about the environment, nobody was doing that. Sustainability. Come on.
So we realized that the only thing we were really getting from NPR was distribution. And so we figured we could actually rent time on the satellite at the time, which is what you had to do. So we had to rent 2 channels for stereo. And we figured out a way to make all our stations continue to get the show.
And there was a actual silver lining, because up until that point, when we were solely with NPR, they said, well, you can't be on commercial stations. And stations that were, big stations like KBCO in Denver and other stations around the country that were commercial were really interested in carrying the show too, but they couldn't. But once we went independent, then we, as Nick said, kept the vast majority of our public stations, but we also were able to open it up to public stations or
commercial,
commercial stations. Thank you. And that was a big deal, because it meant we could reach out and reach even more people, which is the mission of this nonprofit program, which is to reach a diverse audience with information about how we can all make the world a better place. So it was actually sort of a blessing in disguise.
Although I'm sure that at the time it might have sent you into a little bit of a panic. Let me take a brief moment.
It certainly did.
Yeah, it's tough. Let me take a brief moment to say, before I keep asking nosy questions, we would love questions from the audience too for Nick and Helen. So you can type them in. I will be looking at them. There might be appropriate times to throw them into this conversation, or at the end, we will also open it up for questions. Any nosy questions you have to embarrass anybody, I think that's good. one of my questions is, at what point, there had to be times you thought, we just can't keep this going. Why are we doing this besides the greater good? We've had talented careers. We could go back to those talented careers. We could play music. We can do theater. We can do voiceover. Do we want to keep struggling and keep this alive? There had to be times that were tough. Or not.
Yeah, I mean, we faced our first challenge in our first season. So in the very first year in 1991, we were super lucky to get a lot of incredible talent to come and join us. So, I mean, we had Sean Colvin and Lyle Lovett and James Taylor and Willis Allen Ramsey and the Fairfield Four. And all these people came in our first season.
Largely because they knew Nick from the touring world, you know, and he cashed in some chips, and it was an amazing first season.
But we also, we ran out of cash. We were basically funding the entire operation from ticket sales at the Boulder Theater. And it's an expensive show to produce by the time, you know, if you have a recording truck and engineers and all the people and all the post-production and the editing and the distribution, blah, blah.
And we also, you know, my parents had passed away. And so for a while, early on, we were sponsored by the John and Helen Subak Memorial Fund, which was my very modest inheritance that I received when my second parent died. And right around when that was running out, Nick had come into a little bit of money too. So we were sort of feeding it, just trusting that that this was a good thing.
I mean, let me put it in perspective. It was $25,000. That was Helen's. It wasn't like we're inheriting millions and funding the thing ourselves.
No.
So these are tiny little amounts, but it was enough to get us through our first season. But then we ran out of money and we went off the air, and we had a very hard time, you know, regaining the confidence and the trust
and the momentum
of
too.
National Public Radio. We had some stations going, hey, you guys, that really pisses us off. We were just building an audience for you. And now you're saying you don't have funding. So that was when one of our board members suggested that we go out to the Natural Products Expo in Anaheim, California, and do a show in front of the natural products world. And that really saved our bacon for the next 20 years or so, where we just had a deep relationship with the natural products industry. We had a lot of sponsors in that industry, advertisers, and it became an opportunity for us to connect with like-minded companies who were really happy to reach our audience on the radio.
And we were very stubborn too. We weren't going to be sponsored by Exxon or a tobacco company or whatever. We really wanted our sponsors to be righteous, well-intended, conscious companies, and we found them there.
Which is amazing and great. Let's talk about how you wound up, the brief period where, in order to be in a church for eTown, you had to become a minister, Nick?
Yeah.
Should I be calling you Reverend?
Yes, you should, just as they do down at the planning department here in Boulder.
Yeah, they call him the Rev.
No, I was just, it was really funny because from the very beginning, we had a pretty big vision as to what eTown could be. We didn't think of it ever as just a local thing. We always thought of it as being a national enterprise. And it was irrational given our experience and our cash reserves. But we aimed high from the beginning. In 1991, that was the first time I walked through this old church that came up for sale. It was just a couple blocks from where we lived. And on that first walkthrough, I could see the whole potential for what that building could mean for eTown. And it was a screwed up, pretty horrible building, but it had a funky gymnasium that I thought would make a great recording studio. It had the sanctuary, which I thought would make a really nice, couple hundred seat listening room. It had downstairs cafeteria like most churches do, which I thought would make a nice cafe. It had sort of a Sunday school wing that was sort of 3 floors of horrible dark offices that I imagine could be production rooms and offices and stuff. Anyway, I went to the city and I said, we're interested in buying this. Again, we had no money and we couldn't possibly afford it probably. But they said, you could buy it, but you can't occupy it because you're not a church. And so then we tried again. It came up for sale again like 10 years later. It ended up being purchased by the Salvation Army, and then it was purchased again like 10 years later. And I finally just realized that that hurdle of us not being a church was smaller than, it was kind of like when NPR dropped us. And at first we were like, oh shit, NPR's dropped us, we're sunk. But actually it turned out we could replicate what they were giving us for not a huge amount of effort and money. In this case, I realized, wait a minute, we're pretty close to a church. So I went online and got ordained at the Universal Life Church. God bless them. Maybe God does bless them. And I went back to the city and I said, hey, guess what? We are a 501c3, which is just what churches are. We do a lot of singing. We celebrate good works in the community. And I'm an ordained minister. So let's talk about our building permit. Let's talk about us occupying this place. And they rejected my application. And I appealed to the planning board and explained the circumstances, and they accepted it. And so then shortly thereafter, we became the proud owners of a really terrible building that we had mortgaged to the hilt, and we had no cash to try to fix it up, but we worked it out. We persevered.
I often say we're sort of like, if you ever watch those old movies with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, and it was sort of like, oh, the school is in danger, let's do a show and save the school. We just sort of blindly trusted. And I think if we had done what people had suggested in the beginning, like get 3 years of funding and get a business plan and do all this stuff, it never would have gotten off the ground. But we just both had this kind of heartfelt passion for this idea that music can bring a diverse group of people, whether economically or politically or socially or whatever. And while you have their attention with the music, which opens your heart anyways, as we all know, opens your mind, your heart, just throw out these issues and talk about them at a time when they weren't being talked about. And we just felt really passionately that also it was time for some positive news, not Pollyanna, but also to celebrate people who were seeing problems socially or environmentally and were finding ways to solve them, one step at a time. And so and also you have to remember, we're both stubborn Taurians born on the same day. And we just, if I was feeling hesitant or down, Nick would shore me up. If he was having doubts, I would shore him up. This is very early on. And it just, we just kept it going.
You were like Judy Garland.
And I got to perform.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and I got to perform a wedding as a result, like a little side benefit.
Talk about that
one and only wedding.
That is a great story. Talk about that wedding.
Oh, it's just one. It's the only time I've used my official capacity as an ordained minister to tie a marital union, to solemnize a marital union. But it was really just coincidence. And I know that in Colorado, you don't even need to have credentials to marry somebody. But
right.
It was our friends who just said, hey, our buddies are coming into town. They've been together a long time. They decided they want to get married this weekend in Boulder. Do you know anybody who could officiate? And I said, actually, I'm ordained. And they said, great, that's awesome, because you've met them before. It's Lou Reed and Laurie Anderson. And so I went over the night before the wedding to meet Lou and Laurie, and I was pretty freaked out. And I had looked online at all these sort of like celebrity wedding ceremonies and like Elvis's wedding vows and all this. I was just filling my brain with all this kind of garbage. And I went over there and I started talking to them about, so what did you have in mind, and what kind of poetry and what kind of traditions would you like to bring in? And Laurie said, you've never done this before, have you?
Busted.
And so, yeah, I was totally busted. But the next day, it was a beautiful day, and we they tied the knot, and I did my thing, and it was sweet.
Well,
it turned out just great.
Yeah, it is a great story. You have lots of celebrity stories, I know, and I want to talk about the musicians. But before then, let's go back to what you've done for community and to push people who are doing good things. And I know, Helen, you've been doing the Achievements, and talk about some of your favorite Achievement awardees.
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's hundreds and hundreds of stories, and most
We've
of them,
got all night.
Okay, and I have a Cosmo. There's just so many great stories from people who've cleaned up a river to helped the homeless and fed the hungry, and you name it. But a few that come to mind, there's a guy named Chad Pagracki who was in school actually at the time, and he lived just right on the Mississippi River, and he wanted to clean it up. He saw it was just full of junk, and he initially approached like some government agency, and it was going to be all this bureaucracy and months and paperwork. And he was 25, and he said, I don't want to do that. I just want to clean up the river. So he got his boat, which was, pretty small, like tugboat kind of thing. And he got a few friends, and they went out. And when he was on the show, Ben Harper was one of the visiting artists, and he heard the story. And Nick did a great job of interviewing him and drawing him out. And one of the questions I had fed Nick to ask him was, tell us some examples of things that you pulled out of the river. He went on for like 5 minutes. 436 refrigerators, 2 cars, 3 canoes, 84 televisions. He just went on and on and on. And after a while, the audience started to kind of titter, like giggle. And then they were just full out laughing because he just went on and on. He was just such a down-to-earth guy. And after that, Ben was so taken with him that he not only bought him a boombox so they could hear music while they were cleaning up, but he also, when he came into his area, he invited him to come on his tour with him to several shows. And he had Chad get up and before his audience, sometimes of thousands of people, certainly several hundred people at a time, and be able to talk about this project. And it really took his little nonprofit and blew it up. And that was a really wonderful story. There's been so many great stories. I think 2 that mean a lot to me because occasionally we give out Lifetime Achievement Awards. When President Carter came, that was a big deal for me. That was just like, oh my gosh, because of the one president who didn't retire and go golfing, he was helping people, and it was just and he's such a great soul to be around. And then the other is Jane Goodall, who it was a childhood idol of mine. So those are 2 memorable stories too.
Did you ever have someone you wanted to honor, but you just weren't able to for one reason or another?
I'm trying to think. I think there were a few, usually people that were working in Africa or other foreign countries, and we just couldn't make it happen. But oddly enough, a number of times that did happen. I was working with an assistant, and we heard about this person from, I think it was Uganda. I might have my countries wrong, but he was trying to protect gorillas. And I was told, well, he's in Africa. So I said, but let's see if he ever comes to the United States to do fundraising or something. Well, it turned out in 3 weeks, he was going to come and do a week in Fort Collins as a guest professor. So we called him up, and there he was with his beautiful, broken English, telling this wonderful story about saving these magnificent animals from being slaughtered, and that was just things like that.
He taught poachers how to farm instead of hunt gorillas.
And their children and wives to weave baskets and make jewelry. And he helped them have alternative ways of earning money, and they stopped killing the gorillas for feeding their families, to sell, to get money. And that was so heartwarming, and one of the best awards I think we've ever had. And just by chance, just thinking, hey, well, let's just see if he ever comes. And then by all, craziness, he was going to be in Fort Collins. So that was pretty exciting.
That is great. Well, you've got definite fans who mentioned Edward from Rwanda on this. And also want to know any other funny animal stories before we get to the musicians, unless you have musician animals in this too.
I have a musician animal story.
Perfect.
Which is the first time that Los Lobos was on the show. We honored an organization called Sinapu, and I'm pretty sure, and they were involved with reintroduction of the gray wolf into the Rocky Mountain West. And so we thought, wow, this is, instead of having our show be all about a lack of continuity, which is, here's James Taylor, now we're going to talk about renewable energy, now let's get back to music. You know, it was always a struggle to try to create a through line of conversation that would sort of tie the show together. But we thought, wow, this is genius. We've got an award who's doing great work in the Rocky Mountain West with reintroducing wolves, and we've got Los Lobos on, which of course translates to the wolves in Spanish. So we had Los Lobos and the wolves, and the guys brought live wolves on stage, and they Sinapu did, and then they asked Helen to sit down on the front of the stage and let the wolves kind of check her out face to face. And they said, listen, by the way, they say hello by sometimes opening their jaw
and licking you
like
a dog,
or maybe even putting your face in between their jaws. And if that happens, just don't pull away, because then they'll get scared and then they'll get unhappy.
Yeah, they said they feel rejected if you pull away.
Yeah.
And so they'll clomp on harder. And this is like 10 minutes before the show was starting. They told me this, and it was like, okay.
So Helen sat down bravely on the front of the stage and let the wolf come and.
They have big teeth and they have big tongues.
Lick her face.
And they were very sweet.
That's an animal story.
That is a good animal story. That makes any interview sound easy compared to. Did they actually grab you with their jaws?
No, they just licked.
No, I was very, very calm and patient. So they start by licking, and then they'll do this if they don't think you're paying attention. And then if you pull back, they'll go, oh no, wait, I'm so nice, please, you know. And I'm really glad they filled me in, and I just took deep breaths and let them lick away, and it was all good.
And of course, we did pass the wolf initiative this November for Colorado.
That's right.
So ultimately it all worked out, your noble sacrifice.
Yeah, and I still have a nose, and I'm, not deformed in any way.
Well, let's talk about some of the other people who've been on the eTown stage, whether they were licking or not. I mean, some of your favorite musicians who've been there, the ones you got to play with, the ones you didn't. You only have 30 years of stories. Let's hear.
Well, one of my favorites from early on was Pop Staples, just because I was such a fan of the Staples singers. And it was funny because Mavis was establishing herself and her independent career in the early 90s. And I thought about Pops being, kind of not being that busy, but he was occasionally putting out some music. And somehow I got his phone number, and I called him at home, and I got to say, would you come out if we bought you a plane ticket and paid you X amount of money and put you up in a hotel and picked you up at the airport? And, and he said, well, I guess that'd be all right. So he came out. The first time was with Julian Lennon. And then another time he was on with Joan Baez. But that was an amazing experience for me, just because Pop Staples to me represented the highest and best use of music in a way. He really wrote songs that were timely, that were topical, that were easy to be shared with other people, to have sing-alongs and so on. And he marched with Dr. King. He got arrested. He brought his family from Chicago to the South all the time. And so he was an incredible hero for me, as were people like Earl Scruggs and Doc Watson and many of the people, that I'd grown up sort of listening to as a kid.
Can I interject a Pops? I have to do this story. When he was, one of the times he was on, Nick played with him. And after he was done, and it might've been after the show, I don't know that he said it on the show or after, because it's so long ago, but he said, now, Nick, I think I got to adopt you. Because he loved his playing so much.
That was pretty cool.
That was a really sweet moment. And who else?
So many in our first season. The fact that James Taylor came, and Townes Van Zandt was on in our first season. We had so many people. Emmylou Harris came in our second season.
And then people like Sarah Rose, who grew up listening to eTown and said the first time she was on, she was just, it was a thrill for her to actually grow up and be on the show. And now, of course, she's a huge star and just a delightful person and dear friend, and big fan as a kid growing up of Hot Rise. And just all these wonderful connections, have been great. For me, I love Canadians because I'm from Minnesota. And so Dallas Green, City and Color, was a big deal for me.
Bruce Coburn,
and I got to sing with both of them. Yeah. And that was very humbling. And
Sarah McLachlan was one of the first people.
Sarah McLachlan, yeah. She came, the first time she came, you've probably been to her shows where, she had flowing gowns and costume changes and big bands and so forth. When she came, the first time she was on the show, she had pigtails, no makeup, t-shirt, torn jeans, sneakers. And if you listen to that show, she's just phenomenal, just absolutely funny and smart and real. And she stayed that way even when she became absolutely huge. She's a person who I really admire because she's really into animals' rights and advocating for animals in distress. And she's covered a number of issues that are near and dear to my heart. So I really, really respect her. Those Canadians, man, they got something going.
Is there anyone you've wanted and haven't been able to get yet for eTown? We can send the plea out right now.
Well, it's funny. So in 1991, the year we started eTown, Hot Rise was nominated for Grammy. So we went to the Grammy Awards in New York, and I had written these letters that I put inside of my tuxedo jacket. Coming soon to public radio, a great new show that combines great music with environmental, awareness and discussion. And just to kind of spread the word a little bit. And the first person that I gave a letter to was Bonnie Raitt. Because I just figured, she's right up our alley. It's totally exactly what she would love. She's never been on the show. I've asked, I used to travel to LA annually to speak to her management and just say, hey, what can we do? We'd love to have Bonnie on the show. Never happened. The other person that I thought was the most obvious get for eTown was Jackson Browne. Plays every benefit in the world, never has done eTown. So ironically, the first two people that I thought would be literally, I thought those guys would be on our first show in my mind, and that never happened.
I think too, for me, I've always wanted to have Alison Krauss on the show. I remember meeting her when I would go on the circuit now and then with Nick. We had met, and occasionally I would travel with him, not very often, but just meeting her when she was very young. I think when I met her, she was maybe 18 or 19, and I just love her evolution as a person on stage, because she used to be very shy and not say very much, and she's just so smart and so funny and so real, and plus so incredibly talented. What a singer, what a player, what a writer. So you never know.
We also haven't gotten either Neil Young or Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen, but
things can happen.
Things can happen.
But we've gotten some amazing people that I kind of never really thought we would get. So, people like James, and of course Lyle, interestingly enough, when Hot Rise was, at their peak and out there on the festival concert series travel, Lyle was starting out in Texas, and you can imagine he's so quirky and brilliant but eccentric and wonderful in Texas, starting out. And these guys would, he would open for Hot Rise, and they just sung his praises because they just thought he was the nicest guy and also saw his talent. And he's always appreciated that. And he's remained really good friends with Nick and the rest of the guys in Hot Rise. And he's an amazing person, I find, who's very generous and very humble. And I'm happy to know him.
We have had lots of rock and roll Hall of Famers on our show over the years.
That's true.
Well, one of our audience members has a question that is related, and I wanted to remind people you can still send questions in. We're seeing them over on the chat, but wanted to know specifically about unusual pairings you've had on the stage. Maybe those that worked and maybe those that didn't. That you can tell us about.
Yeah, one that I always refer to. I mean, our booking philosophy was usually trying to have one big name and one unknown person. One band and one solo, one male, one female, one style, and then another. One of the funny ones that I always talk about is Willie Nelson and Angelique Kidjo.
I knew you were going to say that one.
Just because they had never heard of each other.
Yeah.
Like Angelique never heard of Willie Nelson and he'd never heard of her. And so just the finale was always a beautiful opportunity to try to get creative people to make something in real time that was out of their comfort zone, a cover and a new arrangement. And Willie was saying, oh, let's just do On the Road again. And Angelique Kidjo was like, I have no idea who is Willie, and I do not know this song. And, but it worked out. They found a great Jimmy Cliff song together. And
oh, it was fantastic.
Sometimes it's like I remember, what's the band, the Canadian band that they wanted to do their finale was this theme song to Gilligan's Island as their
Bare Naked Ladies.
It wasn't Bare Naked Ladies, but
Crash
it was
Test Dummies?
Crash Test Dummies. Yeah. Sometimes the finale is a daunting thing for, I just come from the bluegrass world where you get together and you play and you try something. But for some people, even Sarah McLachlan, the first time she was on with Richard Thompson, was a really hard thing to help her find a cover that she was comfortable with, because she was only performing her own original songs, but they found a Cat Stevens song that they both liked. And anyway, it's always been a mystery because it's not something you can create or arrange in advance. The finale had to be crafted in real time. Literally, we gave everybody 45 minutes to find a song, a key, an arrangement, spread the words around, rehearse it, and then try to perform it again a couple hours later at the end of the show. And it was terrifying, but almost always really gratifying.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, occasionally certain bands, because they weren't used to doing that kind of thing or used to doing covers, would say, well, can we make a suggestion? How about if we do this or that? And it was really kind of a policy to sort of discourage that, to just say, well, let's wait till we all get together. And then Nick had this way of bringing the two disparate acts together, whether they're individuals or bands or whatever, and creating this magic and challenging them without being, intimidating. just as a fellow musician, saying, well, let's try this. And how about if we do it with a slight reggae feel? And suddenly, I can't tell you the number of times that we would come off, me as part of the house band, Nick as the house band leader and host, and then these artists, we'd all come off and be high-fiving and saying, we did it. It was exciting. Every finale was pretty exciting.
I remember sometimes I booked people because it was silly. I booked the band Gomez, and then I found a band from Brooklyn called Zmog, which is Gomez backwards. And I booked those two together just because I thought. But
they worked. It worked.
And then I thought like Maura O'Connell and Michael McDonald. I thought that sort of had it almost sounded like a limerick.
Maura O'Connell and Michael McDonald.
So sometimes the booking was not always curated artistically. It was sometimes just.
Well, rarely though.
Yeah,
rarely. And there's been some great people that have helped Nick with that booking over the years.
Lots of people.
It was definitely like a team effort. Here's our kitty going meow.
I was hoping that was a kitty. Well,
we got some more questions. Yeah, let's go.
Well, I don't want to run out of time without talking about your big anniversary. The Colorado Music Hall of Fame is turning 10 this year, which pales compared to 30 years for eTown. It's such an honor to be able to induct you into the Colorado Music Hall of Fame. But talk about your big birthday coming up on the 22nd. What you have planned, what you might have wanted to do, like go up in a hot air balloon over the city of Boulder. But what will we see on the 22nd, and how can we see it?
Well, it's not going to be a big special big show at Red Rocks or something like that, which it could have been. But we have an amazing group of musicians who've contributed original music or are contributing original music. So we have artists like Sam Bush, Sarah Jarosz, Los Lobos. We're going to play some archival stuff, but we also have the Black Pumas, War and Treaty. We have Bob Weir and Lyle Lovett. We've got City in Color, as Helen mentioned before. Well, it's just, and we've got some interviews, like I interviewed briefly Tim Wirth and our Congressman Joe Neguse. So there's a little bit of conversation around our mission and our values, but.
And there's also a tribute or two, like a happy anniversary from some people that are special. Some
special people.
Yeah.
And it'll also will include our induction into the Colorado Music Hall of Fame. So it's going to be about 2 hours. We thought it was 90 minutes, but it's going to be longer. But
just
great
so much
music.
Great music, we just can't cut it.
You can learn more about it at the eTown website and find out how you can sign up, reserve a spot, but it's free, and it's just a live stream that'll begin on Earth Day, the 22nd of April, next Thursday. I believe it starts at 6:30, but I'm also not reliable around things like that.
That's what I heard too. And how do people find the stream? Do you know?
They go to the website and they go to
eTown.org.
eTown.org, yeah.
Well, so did you ever think you would make it to 30 years? I mean, for us, it's impossible to imagine. I mean, you bring heart and soul and music to Boulder. You make us all look good here in Colorado. You share Colorado with the world. It's all the best. Did you ever think you would be making it 30 years here?
Well, Patty, I could ask you the same thing about Westword. and I think the answer would be the same, which is you do the work in front of you to put out your next issue. And next thing you know, it's decades. And for us, it's been the same. You do the work in front of you to put out the next show. And then when that one's done, you do the work in front of you to put out the next show. And I don't think we thought about, well, let's only do this for 10 years or 5 years or 20 years or whatever. You just do the work in front of you to put out the next show.
And you know how it is being a creative person yourself and doing what you do, that time just flies by. So you're not really thinking about, boy, I mean, maybe lately I've been thinking, because I'm going to be 71 next month. And I'm sort of thinking, boy, this has been going on a while, and I think I need to put my feet up and read a book in the backyard a little bit here and there. But when you believe in something, as you know, you just do it, and the time flies by. Plus, I have to say, I have to give kudos to our wonderful crew. It's like an eTown family, and there's 30 or 40 of us, if you count volunteers, which I do lovingly, that would do every show, and we love each other. You know, we're family. You know, we can bump up against each other, we can grumble at each other. You know, it doesn't happen very often, but you know, we've got a really diverse group of people who are hardworking, big hearts. And when we started this, it was really important, especially to Nick, that the crew be a group that was welcoming and positive and warm and nourishing to the artists that came in, because when you're on the road, you don't always get that, you know. And people still talk about that. Artists would come back after they'd gotten big because they realized what a special experience it was and how well they had been treated. So, you know, we're at a memorial yesterday for Suzanne Fountain, who was an integral part of our eTown family and team. And she unfortunately lost her life at King Soopers here in Boulder when that horrible experience happened. And it was a memorial in Broomfield, and there we all were together, just, you know, so happy to see each other, but under really sad circumstances.
But it is like a family. There were 20 or 25 people there, and we could not have done any of this without them.
Absolutely not.
Great staff, great crew.
And everybody is considered valuable. There isn't like a stepping stone, like, oh, there's the hosts and then there's the, you know, whatever. It's like, it's more of like a theatrical performance in a way. Our shows where, you know, lots of moving parts, lots of stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't see if you're attending it or listening to it. But we all respect each other and care about each other.
I think we're coming into the lightning round, Patty.
Yeah, we are. So Karen, look at some of the questions that I haven't been asking yet, but when we were talking, and I'll come to you in a second, Karen, but we were talking about, you know, theatrical sets, part of the family. The Boulder Theater in a lot of ways is kind of part of that family, the community. What does it mean, what you've been able to do in and for the Boulder Theater?
Well, we love that room. There was a period of time when, right after we started, where the Boulder Theater went out of business, and I negotiated with the owner. And so we actually rented the Boulder Theater by the month just so that we could keep doing eTown shows. But it also meant that we had to stock the bar and make sure there was toilet paper in the bathrooms and, you know, all that stuff. But we loved that room. It was an incredible, powerful home for us. For, I don't know, we probably did 600 shows there or something like that. And I'm so glad that they are still there and still going on. But of course.
And we say every show from the historic Boulder Theater.
Yeah.
In the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. So we used to, yeah. We were able to, during the time we were doing shows there, draw attention to them as well. And I remember some of the staff people there saying, yeah, we had another couple show up from, you know, Idaho or Ohio or New York or whatever. And they're on vacation out here west, and they had to come and see where eTown is being taped, you know, at the historic Boulder Theater. So I think we raised some awareness of the venue as well.
Which is great. And so Karen, feel free to interrupt soon, but the last year I have to talk about the pandemic. How have you pivoted? When will you get back to being able to do a little more of the in-person things? Do you have any idea?
We don't really. You know, we closed in early March, and we're trying to be cautious. We've been making shows without an audience, and we're about to launch 30 episodes celebrating each one of our 30 years. In early May, we're going to start a series of 30 weeks of programs that are all looking back at our archival stuff.
And we'll you know, that'll take us through pretty much to the end of the year. And then past that, there's archival ideas in the works. There's, you know, hopefully we'll be able to do some live events by then, whether they're eTown tapings or not. But yeah, I think everybody certainly is anxious, including our crew. And it was very poignant yesterday at Suzanne's memorial when her life partner, her love of her life, Fee, said, oh yeah, she would say, I'm good at what I do. She helped with Medicare people. And I love my work, but then I'd get off work and then I got to go to eTown and run from a house. She loved it. She loved the music. And I think everybody's looking forward to opening up again and having all kinds of events like we used to.
Well, the archival shows is your opportunity to sit in your backyard and read that book.
I know.
Don't forget it, Nick. It's her time. Karen, did you have any questions you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, we got an email question. As a musician, was there ever a time when a guest was performing and you all were dying to join them but couldn't?
I don't think so. I think that, you know, we were always in service to the song. And a lot of times people would bring their bands or their accompanists or, and sometimes people just felt more comfortable if they didn't have their band with them, that they would perform by themselves. What happened more often was people would say, I don't want to use the band. And they would come and hear us play with the other artist. And then they'd say, actually, let's try a song together. And then we might play like 2 or 3 songs that we would learn right on the spot. So, but I don't think we were ever like, oh, damn, I wish we could jump in there.
All right. And then a question about Ron Jolly. How long has Ron been in the eTowns?
I think it's 23 years. No, 27 years.
27 or 8, yeah. Yeah.
Chris Engelman has been there for all 30 years, the bass player. Ron has been there, I think 27 and a half or 28 years.
And then Christian Thiel has been with us.
Probably 25 or 4 years, something like that.
25 or 6, yeah. And they're all just exceptional artists.
Yeah, those guys really make us look good. I mean, such a great, talk about piano, bass, and drums that can play any style, learn the songs, show up, having done their homework, deliver.
That's amazing. And then how many venues has the show traveled to?
Ooh.
I would say about maybe 12 or 15. We've done shows in a couple of different venues in Boston, both Sanders Theater and the Somerville Theater.
New York.
Kingston, New York, Town Hall in New York City, Baltimore. We did shows in Louisville, Kentucky, Austin, Texas.
Athens, Georgia. Boone, North Carolina.
Salt Lake, Wilkesboro, North Carolina.
LA,
a bunch of shows.
Places, yeah. So yeah,
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, at least a dozen besides here in Boulder.
And throughout Colorado, we've also done shows in Aspen and Colorado Springs and Fort Collins and Denver.
Oh, awesome. That's so cool. It's a lot of places that you guys are at. So I have a question for you. What does it mean to you to be inducted into the Colorado Music Hall of Fame?
It was such a surprise and such a welcome surprise. And I'm absolutely humbled and so appreciative of having that acknowledgement of what eTown has accomplished and what it means to people. It really means a lot.
It's cool that we've also been able to participate with lots of Colorado musicians who've been on our stage over the years. So I like to think that eTown has helped raise the profile for some Colorado musicians as they were starting out. And the fact, as Patty mentioned, that we've been able to shine a light on the music scene here in Colorado for people all over the country. So I'm really honored and gratified. And I do feel like we are a part of this musical community and have, ever since I came to Denver to work at the Denver Folklore Center in 1975, I feel like I've been part of something very special here in the state.
And I do feel that Hot Rise, for all those years that they were out there, also shone a light on Colorado. And so it's a very special honor to be recognized for, we work so hard and we're such a small crew, really, really small crew compared to other shows that you hear out there. And we can all take great pride in being honored in this way. So we say thank you.
Well, we're really excited to have you guys as inductees, our 2021 inductee.
Thank you.
Patty, any other questions?
Well, really just a reminder, you have done amazing things for the musicians in Colorado, and it's great. Any up and comers we should be watching for, future Hall of Famers? Any shows we should be, yeah.
I've been working with a young singer who's actually going to be part of our 30th anniversary live stream, Raquel Garcia. And she's just an amazing talent, and she's been recording some at eTown, and we've been working on songs together. And we're doing probably Chuck Morris is deeply involved with her career and her life. And
she's 15.
She's 15 now, so we've been working with her for a year and a half or more.
She's amazing.
And beyond that, I just think that we're always looking for that special combination of soulful singing and great songwriting. So whether it's on eTown or just shows at eTown Hall or other ways that we can use media and music to reach an audience, we're gonna constantly keep our eyes out for new talent.
And hope to support them.
Well, thank you, because what you've done has been incredible. So it's an honor talking to you, Reverend Helen. We worship what you're doing with eTown. Truly, it's impossible to imagine Colorado without it. And I know Karen any last words you want to share with people? And then Karen will say the goodbye to the crew. Nick, Helen, anything you want to add? Or just tune in next week?
Yeah, we are, I think our show, was it this week, is the one with Willie Nelson and the War and Treaty is our radio show that's on the air this week. Next week, we're going to be running our last a special show that's for Earth Day. And then our live stream event will be part of what's coming up for our 2-part 30th anniversary radio show, which will be heard throughout Colorado. And the live stream thing is going to be really fun for us, and it marks a real milestone, and in some ways an opportunity for us to look back and appreciate all the magical moments we've had with other artists, celebrate with our crew.
And also I'll interject that I'm starting on a podcast that is about the award winners that we've had in the past. So keep an eye out for that, or an ear, I should say. That'll probably start percolating this summer or early fall.
That's great. No, because that is so impressive. Just that list of the people in the achievements, that is a history of what's been going on in Colorado that is all greater good. Karen, do you want to come on to say the goodbyes?
Karen's already
lost
done.
her. There she is.
I'm here. And Maddie's gonna do a share of the screen real quick. So, Nick, Helen, and Patty, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you taking the time for this today. And we hope that everyone on this registers for the 30th birthday celebration. Here's the information, and you can get to register on eTown.org or cmhof.org, the Hall of Fame's website. But we will also be having the next Front Row and Center on Wednesday, May 19th, with the 2017 Hall of Fame inductee, Jim Guercio, the founder of Caribou Ranch. So be on the lookout for that and register. It's also free, happy hour, 5:30 to 6:30. And, the Colorado Music Hall of Fame has a fabulous little museum as part of the Trading Post at the Red Rocks Amphitheater. And it is open and free to the general public every day of the year except Christmas and Thanksgiving. So please check it out if you haven't before. Thank you all so much, and have a great night.
Thanks so much.
Everybody.
Thanks for having us. Lovely to be with you.
Cheers.
Cheers.